All right, man, peace. So for those of you brothers out there who follow professional basketball, aka the National Basketball Association, you'll know that late last year in 2020, the NBA had what I assess to be a major psychological operation called the Bubble Tournament in Orlando, Florida, at Disney World. I thought that it was just going to be another place for the National Basketball Association, which to me is just a front for globalist Marxist forces and also a Jesuit enclave, I believe, to utilize certain tactics on their assets, aka their players, to test certain things out. They were going to be a model for what Biden and a lot of his cabinet are going to try to do on the American populace, just to see what works. They're also going to use a lot of professional athletes as puppets and mouthpieces for a lot of protocols and processes that they want to implement on the people at large. People like LeBron James and Steph Curry and, other prominent NBA players are basically going to be told that for the good of returning things back to quote unquote normal, we're going to need you to say this and to say that. And as I always tell you, brothers, all Marxism is Luciferianism. And the fount of Luciferianism is in Vatican City, led by none other than the Pope, who is the Vicar of Pan, aka Janus. And we're going to see that over the course of this segment. Now, there were certain little subplots and sub-stories that occurred, little narratives that occurred over the course of the NBA's bubble tournament. One of them pertaining to Mr. Jonathan Isaacs, a young player with the Orlando Magic. Of course, he was the one player who stood against the kneeling. He claimed to be a so-called Christian, really a globalist who alleges to believe in the Bible. But most so-called Christians don't really believe in the Bible because most of them don't really understand the Bible. But either way, he played the role of the useful idiot of control opposition. And the NBA, I won't say strangely enough, but curiously enough, have decided to include him amongst a group of players that would go speak to the Pope in Rome, in Vatican City, about quote unquote social justice or social change, which is just a component of the Hegelian dialectic to bring in a quote unquote new world order. There were other players who were included, like Kyle Korver, Marco Bellinelli, but you know what, they're going to talk about it and I'm going to chime in.
Welcome back to the show. It's about to get holy up in here because this next segment features the Pope, his Popeness, El Poporino. Yeah, the Pope Francis reached out to 5 NBA players.
Now, I'm not quite sure if you brothers can see this, but right here, the Pope, he has on a cross with an image that, allegedly is meant to depict the Christ of the Bible. But normally on the crucifix, the Christ figure has his arms outspread in the form of a T, because that was the point of the ritualistic sacrifice on the cross. You were meant to convey that you were a microcosm of Tammuz. You were being sacrificed to Tammuz. Well, on this cross, the image that's on it has its arms in the shape of an X over his chest. And we know the X is for the quote unquote God of the crossroads, whether you want to call that entity Janus or Papa Legba or Asar or Osiris, really for the goat god, right? Min, aka Pan, the quote unquote goat. So that's really what the Catholic Church is about. And that's why underneath the exterior or underneath the facade of righteousness, within the subterranean caverns of Vatican City, there have always been stories about child ritualistic sacrifice, orgies, sex parties between the priests and the nuns. These things are very real because they have the official records and they know about the history of the Roman Catholic Church, that it comes from the Latin Church of the old Roman Empire. And before that, it was the Etruscan Church that was brought over by the Lydians from Asia Minor, who themselves got their belief system from the Assyrians from the Babylonians, the old Babylonians, aka the Sumerians, so on and so forth. So that's all the Pope is. The Pope acts as the doorway or the portal, aka the bridge, hence the name Pontifex Maximus, between the physical world and the spiritual world. He is the Vicar of Pan, who is the God of the crossroads or the God of the doorway. That's why they venerate in these esoteric systems the pineal gland, because the pineal gland is what? It acts as the doorway or the portal.
Invited him to Vatican City, to his home court, because he wanted to talk to the guys about social.
Here, of course, we can see another version of the Tammuz cross emblazoned on the Pope's vesture. Also notice that he's wearing what appears to be a quote-unquote yarmulke. That's because conventional Judaism is just the Caucasian Jewish, or the Khazarian version of what was taught to Israel when they were in Babylon. You understand that? It's all the same thing.
Justice and how the NBA has handled social justice issues over the past year.
Here, once again, the Pope is wearing the same necklace. You might be able to see it here because this photo is a bit lighter. But the symbol, or the image that's on his cross, is of a man who has his arms in the same shape as you might see a pharaoh. Now, the pharaohs of old, especially in the Old Kingdom, they were the high priests as well. That's where the Roman Church, once again, gets the position or the office of the Pope from.
So he reached out and invited Sterling Brown. Sterling Brown, of course, is...
Now, as usual, the photos or the pictures speak 1,000 words in this collage of images. Now, Sterling Brown came, into the national spotlight by supposedly getting involved in a police incident in which he decided that he wanted to antagonize the police, or the police force of Milwaukee, I should specify, because he wanted to park in a handicapped spot because he was making a late night run at some pharmacy somewhere. And as opposed to him just accepting his ticket, he wanted to go back and forth. But pay very close attention, he wears the number 23, so he could be just a low-level Monarch athlete who was never able to make it big in the NBA. So now they're going to use him for a certain narrative, similar to a George Hill, another player who was on the Milwaukee Bucks. And I did a 3-part series on the concept of the buck and what it actually represents, that being the he-goat. So as we can see on his jersey, it says Bucks and then number 23. Number 23 is for DNA manipulation.
Famous not only for being an NBA player, but you remember he was involved in a police brutality incident in 2018 in front of a Walgreens in Wisconsin, where he was allegedly parked in a handicapped spot and cops got aggressive with him. And, we watched the video. It seemed like he didn't do anything to justify the violence that police brought upon him that evening. And he was tased. It was awful. Kyle Korver was
all he did was be a fucking idiot. Now, Kyle Korver, he's trying to use the white guilt ruse, which is a series that I recently started. It's just a way to appease so-called blacks. Another player who does this in the NBA is J.J. Redick. They know their plays. In order for the millions to keep rolling in, they have to play the guilt-ridden Caucasian, the guilt-ridden liberal Caucasian. Oh, I never knew that racism was this bad. And oh, please, LeBron, sign me to the Lakers. Or oh, please, KD, let me play with you on the Brooklyn Nets. I'm a good white guy. That's how they keep their money rolling in. There's no way in the world that you're going to be a Caucasian NBA player who's an out-of-the-closet Trump supporter and still be allowed to make your money. That's the time period that we're in right now. There are massive thought police everywhere because we're heading into very strident Marxism.
Jonathan Isaac was invited. Jonathan Isaac from the Orlando Magic. Remember, guys, he is one of the few players.
It's very interesting that the Orlando Magic decided to give him the number 1. Those of us who know the history of the Orlando Magic, Penny Hardaway wore the number 1. Tracy McGrady, I believe, also wore the number 1. So one would think that they would retire that number, if not even necessarily for a particular player, at least for a player who they thought had a special purpose. But maybe Mr. Jonathan Isaacs does have a special purpose. Now, there was a brother in one of my comment sections who said that he grew up with Jonathan Isaacs. Sometimes you grow up with people you don't even know who the hell they are. I'm not going to cast aspersions on the brother. We'll see who he is. He's someone who seems to be impassioned. For whatever reason, they chose him to be a part of the convoy to go speak to the Pope. Once again, 99% of so-called black Christians don't know or understand the Bible. If you knew the Bible, there'd be no reason for you to go speak to the Pope because you know who the Pope is. He's a fleshly manifestation of everything that the Bible speaks against.
That decided not to take a knee during the national anthem during the NBA bubble.
Bowing down the knee to Baal. Once again, the entire NBA tournament in the bubble was sponsored by the Black Lives Matter so-called movement, which is just a front for the globalist Marxist forces represented here in America by the Democratic Party. That's it. That's why all these fools had to wear those t-shirts, and that's why you had Black Lives Matter on the NBA floor. That wasn't just for fun. Adam Silver didn't just say, we're going to put this down. He was getting money from them.
suffered an injury during the NBA playoffs as well. Hopefully he's doing better now. Marco Bellinelli and Anthony Tolliver.
Now, Marco Bellinelli is from Italy. They decided to allow him to go speak to the Pope as well. We know that he played with the San Antonio Spurs. I've stated in the past that Mr. Greg Popovich, in my view, is an MK programmer and handler. He also plays the role of someone who stirs the pot, along with Steve Kerr, who has CIA ties as well through his father. So who knows who exactly Mr. Marco Bellinelli is? If I were to put money on it, I would say that he's a Jesuit. Would not surprise me at all. A Jesuit who was just sent into the NBA to act as a certain agent of change when the time was relevant or necessary.
Rounded out the 5 people involved.
Now, as we can see here, this is Mr. Anthony Tolliver, wearing the number 44. I highlighted that number in a series that I did on Chadwick Boseman. I believe that the race car driver Lewis Hamilton was wearing the number 44. That number stands for destruction. And of course, he's flashing the 666 hand sign here. So these photos are always meant to have a double meaning. In the context of the NBA, that hand sign means that he hit a 3-point shot. But for those of us who see things on a 3-dimensional level, we know that that number represents 666 for Saturn, or the hidden god, aka the GOAT. So who this cat is, who knows? He could be someone undercover as well, perpetrating a fraud as an NBA player.
To the Vatican. You can see the photo right here of the Pope speaking.
Now in this room, the Pope is sitting up under a portrait of what alleges to be an image of the quote-unquote Virgin Mary, but that's actually just the mother goddess. All you brothers know this by now. Aphrodite, aka Juno, goes by a myriad of names.
The players. This meeting actually took place in the Papal Library at the Apostolic Palace.
Now, at the Papal Library, they have a copious amount of records, but the real records are in the basement.
For the meeting, they got a tour of St. Peter's Square. But the whole reason this meeting came together is because Pope Francis reached out to the NBA Players Association and said, I'm very curious to learn from the players specifically about how they brought attention to pressing social justice issues. So he invited the guys.
That's a roundabout way of saying you guys are doing a great job of promoting Marxism in America. Let me touch bases with you so that I can inform you on how to take this to the next level. The NBA is no longer a sports league. It's really just an outlet of propaganda. That's all it is.
All 5 said, absolutely, I'm there, 100%. And then they got on a plane and they flew out there and they had this meeting today. Renee, as somebody who opted out of the 2020 WNBA season to focus on social justice initiatives and police brutality and stuff like that, how does this make you feel to see that the Pope is now investing his time and energy into learning from basketball players?
It should make you feel suspicious. Why the fuck does the Pope need to speak to basketball players about social justice issues? Shouldn't he be trying to get into contact with community leaders and things like that? Unless, once again, he's just trying to touch bases, aka debrief particular assets that he knows lie dormant within the NBA. I mean, what would be the point of this overall?
It's a big deal. I just say it's a big deal in a sense of, first of all, this is the Pope that we're talking about, like the Pope.
Right, but what does that mean? What's the relevance of that? Do you understand his station, or are you just saying that because you're in awe of his title?
Big deal also that a lot of people don't think that athletes should be talking about this in general, so...
And they shouldn't be, other than on their social media. Athletes are not supposed to be representing the masses. They're not intelligent enough, and they don't understand the real issues that people have to deal with on the day-to-day. The thing is that athletes can be easily compromised because they've been entitled and spoiled their whole lives. So what the athlete is really useful for is understanding how easily they can be manipulated because they're attention whores. They're also accustomed to being in front of people and on stage. So there's a very thin line between a high-level athlete and an actor. And they can be used for the same purpose, that being propaganda.
For another whole Pope and somebody of that caliber to recognize them, I mean, I think it's great. I think that only good things can come of it.
Look at this guy here. His whole face screams pedophile. Allegedly. Everything I'm saying in this video is alleged, by the way.
curious about the group though. Like the group that went there, I'm wondering like how did they select that group of people? I'm just curious because like when I think about
Good question, Renee. I guess every once in a while, even a blind squirrel could find an acorn, huh?
I don't know if that's a part of the social justice committee or not, but I think of the MVPA and the people that were very integral in like making the decisions when it came to that. A lot of them weren't there, probably for time constraints. But yeah, I love it. I'm just curious, like, how did they select those?
Like, are you saying that like you would expect? I mean, for me, I think that everybody wants to know like where's LeBron, right? LeBron sees.
No, nobody cares about where LeBron is. LeBron is not going to make a trip like that because LeBron has other overlords that he serves. That's number one. Number two, I'm sure that he was told that the meeting was not going to be on TV. So once he heard that it wasn't going to be on TV and it wasn't going to be broadcast, he said, why would I be there then?
To the NBA, he was very outspoken about social justice issues, and I think that's.
Well, I'm sure that if they could have gotten LeBron, I think they would have gotten LeBron. So.
Right, but to talk about what? Once again, we're making a correlation or an alignment between a person who's perceived to be the best basketball player in a sports league and how relevant his views are on societal issues and potential changes. One has nothing to do with the other. Just because someone is great in their field does not mean that that is going to translate over into other fields of endeavor. And unfortunately, the way that people's brains have been distorted and contorted through false information and idolatry, so many people actually believe that this fool's opinion matters.
I think that was probably an option, like LeBron going. But I'm just curious about, like, how did they select that group? I know Michelle Roberts is there, and she's a part of, over the NBPA and different things of that nature. But I just am very curious about the group, even when it came to someone that didn't kneel.
Now we're getting somewhere. It took her a long time to get there. She asked a good question, but for a selfish reason. She's upset that Jonathan Isaacs was allowed to be a part of this group because he didn't kneel. Once again, brothers, when it comes to liberals, they'll talk your ears off about being open-minded and accepting and inclusive. But that means that you have to be inclusive only of the things that they agree with. They don't want to be inclusive of people who disagree with them. They have to create these bubbles where only people who agree with them are allowed. If someone else is there, because liberals, they understand deep down that they cannot deal with a debate because their belief system is based purely in idealism, never in precedent. That's why it's ironic that they talk about things like believing in science, because real science has to be tested over and over and over again before it's accepted. The vast majority of beliefs that liberals have never been successful anywhere. Some of them will openly talk about being communist. Communism has never worked anywhere, and yet they espouse it. Some of their beliefs in gender roles, or even the biological understanding of gender, have never worked anywhere, but they're espousing it. You understand? So the liberal does not believe in real science. They believe in propaganda. They believe in false idealism. That's why they always have to vet everyone who's around them, and they have to get rid of the people who disagree with them because they know that their beliefs will not hold up under scrutiny, which is what real science is, once again. And the term science, as you brothers know, means knowledge.
It was a bad group of people to represent the league? Do you think they could have done better?
I don't think it's a bad group. I'm just curious, how was the selection?
Yeah, look.
No, you think that it was a bad group. You want to know why Jonathan Isaacs was allowed there. Just say it.
Over 1 billion Catholics in the world. The Pope is one of the most highly respected people that you could ever talk of, especially when you're talking about Catholic people. So I feel like, up until this point, this has largely been an American issue. I think when you involve the Pope, then it becomes more of a global issue.
Because it was always a global issue. This is a global movement. The Black Lesbians Matter movement is receiving global money, global sponsorship. The Pope is in on it as well.
That can only be a positive thing. I think this conversation can only be a positive thing. I'm kind of with Renee. It's a different group, but look, I don't know why these guys were chosen. I think it's a bet.
I just told you why. They're assets. All of them assets. Just telling you my perspective. In my view, Bellinelli most likely is a Jesuit. For those of you who don't know, the Jesuits are basically the Catholic Church version of the Central Intelligence Agency. He probably was planted within the NBA. His job was to confer with Greg Popovich, and when his relevance or his usefulness was needed, he'll be utilized. People like Jonathan Isaacs, to me, he's just a youthful idiot. Could be more than that, but as of right now, that's how I'm assessing him. Sterling Brown, another person probably who was just an asset who never reached fulfillment, so now they're using him for something else. Tolliver, the same thing. These guys are sprinkled all throughout the NBA. If you think that there are however many players in the league, 1,500, and they're all just there because they play basketball, well, you're a fool. That's in any professional sports league. One of my favorite films as a kid was the movie Naked Gun, starring Leslie Nielsen. And they basically showed you at the end, or near the end, that O.J. Simpson and Reggie Jackson were Monarch athletes, mind controlled from their youth.
Conversation, it's one that should happen, and I'm happy it did happen. I think this only can be good for the issues that we face.
Yeah, I mean, look, Sterling Brown was the victim of police brutality.
Yes.
And then you have Jonathan Isaac.
Yeah,
Sterling Brown was the victim of idiocy.
Ton of sense. And right, Jonathan Isaac too. Look, everybody else on the Magic, they kneeled, and Jonathan didn't, and I know he caught a lot of flack because of that. Yeah. So I give him credit.
From a two-dimensional perspective, kudos to him for having the courage to not be a sheep and be a follower. Kudos to him for being his own person. Do I believe that there's more to this than meets the eye? Most likely, but we'll see. I could be wrong.
Believes that's what's right, for standing up what's right, and he's probably a good person to have a conversation with and maybe to present the other side of the issue.
Yeah, so I'm saying, like I don't think you want to hear 5 people with the same perspective. I think
ding, unless you're a toxic liberal, Mr. Evan Rosenblum, because toxic liberals know that their beliefs will not hold up under the light. They know that already.
I want to hear from different people who have different opinions.
I agree. I'm just curious, did they do that? Did they say...
Now, you see, as soon as Evan said that, she jumped in because she knew that that he was taking a little jab at her. Or at least that's how she perceived it, because that was her intention. Especially the liberal woman. They can't deal with someone who disagrees with them. They can't even be around that person.
Let's bring Jonathan because he didn't kneel, and let's bring him because he was I'm just curious, is that how it was picked? Because if it was, then I like how calculated it was. I always like to know the ins and outs, like how did you get that group? But like
nonsense. If Jonathan Isaacs wasn't there, you would not be asking that question. If everyone there was made up of people who kneel, was comprised of people who were a part of your Marxist belief system, you would have said, oh, great job picking the team. But because someone was there who didn't kneel, now all of a sudden you're inquisitive about the choosing process.
I can understand definitely both of those. Like, I get it. I just want to know, like, what was the selection process? Because I just like to know the ins and outs.
Well, the guys are currently on a tour of the Vatican, so when they're done with the gift shop, we can hit them up and hopefully get some answers.
Yeah, when they're done with their ritual underneath the Vatican of drinking blood, they'll let you know exactly how they got picked. But anyway, peace.